Reichman University.
Come to my hackathon, come, bo. I just for you hackathon, special deal, 20% off.
Startup Shuk. Exploring Israel's tech bazaar with Deo Arlo.
Welcome everyone to Startup Shuk. I'm joined today with Max Goldberg, the founder of HotDrop.
Awesome, thank you for having me, Deo.
Max, how are you?
Doing well. Getting closer to the end of the year, working on side projects, having a lot of fun.
Amazing, man. I discovered you, we discovered each other via Instagram, and I think you're one of the first, you're the first person which I contacted outside of my circle for this podcast, because I mentioned before we started that I do this just purely out of habit. I like to meet people in cafes, and I thought, why not just record it in a podcast? But you are outside of my circle, so this is the first time I contacted someone and built a new relationship through the internet, and that's very exciting. I think that's my future goal. I want to do more of these and meet with more interesting people out there outside of my circle. That's the goal. And I was watching your videos and I realized this guy gets it, because we have a lot of influencers talking about startups, talking about hustling, but they don't have much of the experience. You're a two-time founder, and as a founder myself, I'm a one-time founder. I'm trying to get myself into a two-time founder, but I really click with all of your message, and I really liked it. So I would like to know more about you, and how we do it here in this podcast is we like to learn more about your story, not just about your businesses. It's very interesting, of course, but I think the founders are very, very core to the story, and I would like to know your, growing up. What is Max like when he's younger, and what led you to entrepreneurship? Stage is yours.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Still think it's unbelievable that we can meet people on the internet just from something like short form content. I honestly never thought I'd be here. So starting back to my journey, I'd say it really started back in 2016, 2017. At the time, I was actually in middle school, and that was during the time of the rise of the casual gaming space. So we had those simple gaming apps, the Catch app, the Voodoo Labs, those games, if you can remember. And everyone around me was just obsessing over these, throwing all their time away. And as someone that always had that entrepreneurial gene or spirit, I felt that there's an opportunity to go and make my own games. So that's really where my journey started in like software development, was in the casual gaming space. So I went on YouTube, spent a lot of hours, super frustrated, teaching myself how to code. After, several months and really a couple of years of trial and error, I was able to put out some gaming apps. Didn't see too much success outside of, my immediate friend group, families and whatnot. But at that point, I was known as the app guy in my suburb outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Going into high school, I was still obsessed with building things as a natural creator. And in 10th grade, I built and sold a utility app company. Happy to get into more of that later. That provided me with some early financial stability, but also at that point, I was completely hooked, knew that I wanted to work and create things in the software and tech industry for the rest of my life. And I think that was really unlike a lot of my friends at the time who had no idea what they wanted to do. I really had that conviction at a young age. Now, going into college, I wanted to continue to build things. I was idealist at that point and felt that through some of the mentorship I had gotten, that studying finance and understanding more of how businesses are run, how value is created, knowing that I probably want to sell more companies one day, it might be a nice idea to understand what those businesses are actually looking for. So I studied finance at the Kelley School of Business at Indiana. So go Hoosiers. Had a great time, broke into investment banking, which was completely the opposite of what I was doing on the app side of things. I think that was more stable, definitely something that people around me were doing. And certainly my parents probably, wanted me to pursue a more definitive career path. Worked in that briefly. And actually on the desk when I was working at an investment bank, I recruited for and got accepted into Techstars with my most previous startup, HotDrop. Left school early, worked on that full-time for a couple of years, and actually recently finished up online and graduated and got my degree. So that's kind of the nutshell of where I'm at now. I've worked on several projects and happy to speak to them in more detail.
How did you learn coding? Because you're studying finance, so I presume you're learning it by yourself. Yeah,
so I really started self-teaching myself back in middle school. So I was about 13 or 14 years old at the time. That was very challenging. I have always been the person that likes to self-teach. I'm a natural Googler. I always go to YouTube when I want to learn something. I don't go to friends. I don't go to people. And fortunately, there was just so much content online, even at the time, to learn. So for me, that looked like cloning, Snapchat at the time, cloning other apps. And I think cloning existing products you like is a really great way to start getting that, touch and feel of how do you build location? How do you access the camera, right? And once you kind of master those skills, you're kind of at the point where you can start to build your own things.
I really agree with that. I actually also started building stuff before it was taught in school. And I gotta admit, and for those who are watching and who's wondering if is it worth it to go to like engineering or STEM, just for the sake of learning these things, I would say pursue what you really want. But these things, if you want to learn the technical skills, you can learn them yourself. Because I gotta say, like even now, having been in an engineering school, I would say that most of the skills I've been using had not been from school. It's been from in YouTube and a bunch of tutorials, and that's been very, very useful. Tell us a bit more. How did you start Hot Drop? You got to figure out like the idea, the team, and what led you to music. It would seem to me that's very disjoint from the finance world that you are within.
Very, very different. And it's a great question. I think just kind of segueing into what your point was, the theoretical knowledge you're going to get studying business or computer science or whatever field, I was always skeptical of the education system and what I was learning in the US. They definitely try to embrace this liberal arts, we study everything, the arts, humanities, education. That's great for some people, but for people that know what they want to do and are trying to actually build real things, I figured that the comp sci education would certainly be helpful. I have plenty of engineering friends who are much smarter than me. But I didn't think that would actually help me build real products. It would mostly be theoretical or help me if I was pursuing that as a career, right? So knowing that I was always working on side projects and I have the skill set to build whatever I wanted, my approach leading up to Hot Drop was always just kind of being an indie hacker, building side projects. But with Hot Drop, it was a bit different. So I didn't have an idea or a problem I wanted to solve, unlike in the past where I was really focused on, okay, is there a business opportunity here? I decided to take a step back, relax a little bit, and try to see if inspiration would hit me, right? And try to build something from there. So when I was in, I believe it was my sophomore year, so this was 2021, a couple friends and I who went to Indiana, we're obsessed with music. College has such an influence on music has such an influence on college age folks' lives, right? You can't get around a college campus in the United States without someone talking about music or their favorite artist. But the emergence of TikTok was happening simultaneously with my own passion for like indie artists, independent artists, emerging talent, right? SoundCloud has been dead and dying for quite some time. And my team became my team, my friends, we saw that there might be a way to bring this sort of like shorter form content to music discovery. But instead of focusing on the mainstream artists, right, that Spotify and Apple Music, they do so well, we could focus exclusively on smaller artists who are independent from record labels, right? So we hacked together a side project, which wasn't a business. We weren't looking to start a business, which ultimately became Hot Drop. And pretty quickly, we went viral on a lot of the major college campuses here in the US, primarily in the Midwest. We did 2 million songs discovered on our platform within 2 weeks of launch. 25,000 monthly active users. And at that point, we realized, hey, we actually might have something on our hands, but this kind of organic experience had never happened to me before.
It's very interesting. I have two questions. Number one, I want you to expand on the thing you mentioned before about not intending to build a company. You're just building it for the sake of the problem. And it relates to the post you made this morning, or was it, I don't know what time was it, but it was this morning in my time. And the second one is, how did you see that kind of growth happening? What caused it? And what did you do to get that kind of growth and awareness?
Sure. So growth is always a work in progress. And as I'm sure I'll get to this in this interview, growth and distribution is, in my opinion, far more important than the product, at least well within the early stages. You can really grow something that's rough around the edges if you hit that nerve, right, with the target audience. So exactly. I think for us, because we weren't approaching this as what is the problem? What is the solution? What is the business opportunity here? We weren't driven by financial incentive. We weren't thinking about monetization. And I think that created an environment where a few just hungry students at the time could make something that worked for us. We built this thing for ourselves and we were using it. We were enjoying it. Our friends started to use it and enjoy it. And then we started to seed that into Greek life. So fraternities and sororities at our school, and using some clever strategies to get them to share it with their other Greek counterparts at other schools. So our strategy was to seed Greek life here, which is what Tinder had done, as Bumble has done, very similar strategies, because these are the kids that share everything and they love music.
That's brilliant. Expand on that. Talking about the things that are rough on the edges, but you can really get a lot of people to use it. And I've seen a bunch of products these days. OpenAI have released a bunch of APIs recently, and we've seen a bunch of rappers, just literally putting React buttons on top of the API and raising a bunch of money, right? But they do their marketing right. They talk about it in social media. They build in public, which I think a lot of first-time founders fail to realize is important. And they keep their idea secret. They think it's a $1 billion idea, and they don't want to share it with the world. What's the perspective of a second-time founder?
Right. And I've been there, and I've said everything you've said. I've wanted people to sign NDAs. I wanted to keep my work private. Once you start actually building something and it's the day of launch, you get to the point where you realize you would stand on a building and like scream down to people. This is a quote, I think, from Paul Graham, right, of YC, but you'd scream or do anything to get someone to use your product. It is impossible to grow things in an age of distraction. Every vertical is saturated, right? So building in public, or just more generally, prioritizing the distribution before, during, and as you build the thing, that is probably one of the most important takeaways that I would hope anyone watching this would get. It's not an option. You have to do that, right? In terms of the rough around the edges, our product was crashing. We used Firebase as authentication service just to get the thing going in the beginning. That becomes very costly, but they also started to throttle our auth signups. So our quota, we were exceeding it every day, and we were getting 1-star reviews, and you can go and check 1-star reviews all the time in the beginning. I can't get into the app. I can't sign in, right? These are growing pains. It's exciting to have, an over demand for what you're building. And that doesn't always happen. But when you're trying to get something to market as fast as possible, you're going to make those trade-offs on the tech, on the design and other things, just to get feedback and to get real usage. So that's kind of what I mean by rough around the edges. I think in terms of the lessons that you can take away as a first-time founder, and what really will vary from a second-time founder, my content, I try to infuse satire and entertainment with the lessons I've gotten to get more people to listen and benefit from it. But in terms of the biggest lessons, I think you hit it right on the nail with, you must prioritize distribution, go to market, but owning that distribution channel as a founder, whether that's your founder brand on social media, whether that's creating a podcast that you can then slice up and reduce your time commitment to produce, content every day. Those are strategies that are clearly working. They're 17-year-olds making $1 million+ ARR. They're hacking together a product with these AI tools, Cursor. They have the TikTok marketing game nailed, and they are making more money than, 30, 40, 50-year-olds, not that age matters, who've been doing this for years, because they get how to stand out now. So I think like the greatest lesson, although there's so many, is knowing that the marketing is 90% of the game at this point, not just half, not 10%. Everything has changed, and you need to adapt your strategies for the outlook, right?
I think that's a brilliant topic, a brilliant point that a lot of technical engineers, technical founders is very having a hard time trying to accept, because they believe that the product is everything. Wozniak is a typical example. Not that they're not brilliant, they're very, very smart, but I think they need to accept the new reality that this new age of attention requires their attention, and they have to put in their work. And I've been feeling that you are growing lately very, very fast in Instagram with your content. And I'm actually also motivated because of that. And I'm planning to chop up this podcast, as you
Amazing.
know. That's my plan, to create my online presence. So what's next for Max? What is your next venture? What's going on with Hot Drop, and what are you planning for the future?
Yeah, so kind of in this transitory period between, my previous venture and we might have some exciting news that I can't share more about for Hot Drop. But while I'm, in between opportunities, I've personally taken the liberty and gotten myself in the mindset, right, in the right mode where I'm comfortable and fortunate that I'm in the financial position to do so, of course, where I can take a step back. And if I'm not working for 6 to 8 months in a formal, in employment with some big tech company or another startup, I've primed myself to be comfortable with that. In an industry where in Silicon Valley, if you go to a conference, right, and they say, oh, what are you doing? And you say, I'm actually not doing much right now. I'm exploring, I'm reading books, I'm learning about a new industry, right? They're going to turn their attention pretty quickly to someone else because this is a very fast, people have high expectations space. So I've gotten comfortable with the idea of, I don't necessarily know what's next. That uncertainty scares me. I've made content about it. But I'm trying to embrace the fact that at this point, with so much change going on in how we build products, in the macroeconomic landscape, with VC changing, there's a lot of new opportunities. And I think what would be a poor decision for myself right now is jumping the gun, trying to jump into something that I might feel is the necessary next step or the right next step for me. But I want to catch that next wave. Personally, I'm exploring a lot with the new AI development tools. I'm working on some side projects, none of which are released. I'm using Cursor extensively. For some projects, I'm writing, minimal code, which is mind-blowing. It might not be the best code, but again, it's going to get me something out that I can test with this audience I'm building. So I think for any, aspiring entrepreneurs who have the privilege of hearing something like this before they're going out and building the first one and realizing how impossible and hard this stuff is, building that audience, whether that's posting on Twitter, LinkedIn, posting short form content on Instagram, TikTok, I really believe that we are still early in the tech space with founders embracing this kind of audience building. And now is the time to get on that wave so that when you have that project or you have that new opportunity, you have a base of supporters who can become customers, users, or just advocates to keep you going.
That period of uncertainty is something that a lot of people can't really afford. And I think it's a real privilege that we can have this. I had a similar experience, which I dropped out of my previous university. And I want to hear your story. What led you to dropping out, and what was the decision like? It was difficult, I presume. And what was in your mind?
Sure. I was the last person to ever consider dropping out of school. Like, that is not who I am. I was always a very good student. I always, I didn't hate school. I actually enjoyed it. I like learning new things. That was shocking for myself and certainly the people that knew me. Fortunately, I didn't do that out of the spur of the moment with no, landing pad or safety net. I had gotten into Techstars, had the ability to be in person with the program, and then had that be the first money into HotDrop. So I knew with certainty that leaving school at that point was the best decision I could ever make as a then 20-year-old turning 21. I'm 23 now, knowing that my age in this industry is advantageous pretty much throughout the entire duration of building a company. Whether it's press, growth, just storytelling in general, and attracting talent. I think there's something about that young spirit that is energizing and attracts the best people and might attract the best investors, the best press, right? Those kind of moments. So for me, I felt that everything was kind of aligning. I was young. I had the opportunity to raise, take in capital to the business, learn what I actually wanted to be doing with the mentors and folks that I wanted to be around, and get rid of, my time spending time in Venture 101 classes. I remember, I'll tell you this, it's a funny story. I had one day of my senior year of school. I was in my senior year of college, so I went the whole duration. And on the first day of classes is when I made the decision to leave. That very first class I went to on the first day of my last year in school, I was in a Venture 101 class, venture capital financing, and I saw what the professor was talking about. I knew it had nothing to do with what I just did to get into Techstars, nothing to do with it. They were talking about terms and strategies that, IPO'd companies should be thinking about, not a pre-seed startup with a ragtag team of teenagers, basically. And at that point, I realized, where's my time and network going to improve? Where's my time going to be best spent? Where's my network going to improve most rapidly? So I made that decision. I loved it, took a leave of absence with a smile on my face. I was excited, knowing that with the college system, at least here in the States, it's very easy, usually, to go back to school and to continue where you left off. They don't usually make you reset or reapply. I'm not sure if that stands true internationally, but here, why not potentially change your life when you can afford the maximum risk?
That's true. And you can only afford risk at certain periods of your life. You're young, you can afford the risk. As you grow older, you have a family, you have real work, you're required to have real work. it is real work. Not that this is not real, but conventional, stable income, you will not have the time or risk, capacity to do these kind of things. I would like to share my story because I find I really related to your story. I'm also 23 right now, just turned it a couple months ago, and I studied mechanical engineering at the Technion. I did 2.5 years, and that's basically just half of it already. I should have just let it finish, But in my second year, my friend invited me to this startup competition, and we decided to join. We won. I joined in a whim, right? I didn't know what startup was. I was a very techie guy. I like to build things, but I did not know the world of business, entrepreneurship. It was alien to me. And then there's this startup competition. I thought, why not? Competitions are fun. Just joined, did it, and they needed us to make an app. So I did it in like 1.5 months because the duration is 1.5 months. And me and my friend just crushed it. We loved it so much. It was so much fun. We won and raised funding. And by that time, I was on cloud nine. I was a 20-year-old student, 19 at the time, 19 and a half. And we raised from Go Ahead VC in Silicon Valley. And man, I realized I never wanted to go back to school because I found that all the subjects that they're teaching in school is a very good and insightful topic. However, I've discovered this new thing that would lead me to where I want to be in a much more efficient way. When we talk about entrepreneurship, it's really just value creation. And sure, you can be a valuable member of society by being an engineer, working on aircrafts or cars or whatever. But you can really, really change the game and step ahead by this new thing that we invented called entrepreneurship and startups. And man, I was so excited. I dropped out. And although the result right now is that I need to found another company because we decided to close it down after 1.5 years. We learned our lessons. We learned so much that I did not regret, dropping out of my first university. And it's one of the best experiences of my life. I would not change that. I would not ask Loki to turn back time. But I wanna hear your future. What's yours after Hot Drop?
Yeah, well, great to hear your story. I think we're similar in many ways. I think part of the point of entrepreneurship, sure, value creation, but also risk and risk taking. That I think that's inherently what makes an entrepreneur an entrepreneur. It's really financial risk. So I think there's a lot of young people, especially young men our age, who definitely aspire to have more wealth, to be financially free, if you will. But we have a lot of, I think, bad actors and bad characters who are preaching, whether it's blaming certain people or certain entities for the situation you're in, or trying to uplift you through some get rich quick scheme, but more so like this dogma that seems compelling, but it's really not real. That is what has inspired me to take to content, where I knew that I could share my lessons. I knew I could talk to people about, avoiding enterprise sales as a startup, or, initially, and that's actually changing, but how to hire a team. I knew that the audience of people that wanted to hear those specific lessons that I got through real experience, burning millions of dollars, working with real team members who were incredible. I knew that if I just shared those lessons as education, I didn't think it would be sticky enough. So I tried to take another part of my personality, which is like this humorous side of me, and try to teach those concepts, but with like satire, or just almost making fun of myself. And by doing that, making fun of all of us who happen to make the same mistakes. And it's kind of weird that we all make very similar mistakes. So I think one thing, and how it relates to what I'm doing next, I've really taken the time to step back and analyze, how did I get to this point, right? What sort of information lessons were gatekept? What could I transparently show to the world that I would have killed to have when I was first starting out? And by analyzing the past, I'm kind of morphing and looking at my future trajectory and thinking, okay, well, if these were sort of the mistakes that I was making, and I'm preaching this content about my journey up to this point, who can I seek out mentor-wise, content-wise, although not a lot of it exists, who are now 2 steps beyond where I am now, knowing that this is helping so many people? Can I help myself by latching on to people who are at the next 2 steps, right? So again, I think I've been in this period of self-reflection where by doing content, I've been able to really internalize the lessons on a much deeper level than when I just took them for granted in my head. But then when I sit and write them out, right, and I preach them and I see the reactions that I get, I'm trying to make sure that I am that student in my own comment section now, but for someone else, whether that be on social media or a mentor, to take myself to the next level. So, I think the next couple years will definitely entail some kind of mixture of employment, working for another startup. I don't really have an interest in working for a massive corporation right now, because I don't think I'd be able to create. And that's what I learned that I love to do. If you're building tech, you're a natural creator.
I doubt we'll have as much of an impact in a large corporation than a small, fast-moving startup. I have a feeling that in the future, more and more companies will size down and become much smaller. We've seen with the advent of AI that you don't need as much people to get the same job done. So I have a strong feeling that in the future, companies, it's almost like work is going to be decentralized, and these huge corporates are just going to break down and fragmentize into smaller, SaaS sort of solution. We see that companies like Google monopolies are trying to be cracked down by the government. And I don't think the government needs to do much of that in the future, because it's going to happen by itself. Solutions are going to be in packet-sized SaaS B2B companies, I feel.
Totally. And I posted a video about that a couple of weeks ago with Klarna and, the buy now, pay later company that's mostly used internationally. And they're they claim, whether it's boardroom politics or real need, could be both, they are vertically integrating their own vendors, their own tech stack, and they're trying to build their own internal CRM, replace Salesforce, which is expensive. They're trying to replace Workday, which is an atrocious piece of software, as someone who's been on both sides of it. So I agree that consolidation and that leanness is going to probably prevail across all sorts of industries. I think it's just happening in tech first. So that's why I think that one of the things that most people should be focused on now, and you and I got to take the risk of leaving school and going to work on something in a world where building software and products essentially gets down to a marginal cost of zero. Right? There is no technological moat. There is no difference between you and I, hypothetically, in building something out, right? Just for the sake of the argument. Does your diploma at school actually carry any weight in today's job market? I know plenty of people that are recruiting right now. I've had my fair share of dabbling in and out to see what's out there. I don't even think people are looking at my academic experiences. They're looking at what I've built. They're looking at the KPIs and the success stories of what I've accomplished. That's what they're going to remember. So I think now that the stakes are as high as they've always been, but the barrier to entry is so low, I really believe that more people should take a real look at, can I work with these tools to scrap something together, knowing that as a good founder, technical or not, all you need to do is get the thing to be something people want, easier said than done, and then you can hire the best engineers and designers, whatever you name it, to come in and really build the thing out with you at the helm. So I think that people have this sort of, people that are in a transitory period in their career, I think they should really give it a look here. They don't have to build the whole company on their own. You will bring in a team to go out and support what you're building, but if you're you're that secret weapon person that can take something in your head and make it, available to real people, I think that those specific skills are going to be far more valuable to employers.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you have a lot of strong opinions about education as I do, because we both dropped out. Essentially, university is this machine, is a factory to create employees to work for companies and create value, large companies now. However, as I've mentioned before, and we've seen trends going on in the future, that companies are going to be more and more smaller, fragmentized, and value can be produced by anyone. Right. And so we're seeing a trend where people start to skip their bachelor's degree. They just start building companies. And obviously in the Bay Area and in the US, it's very, very popular these days. But I have a strong feeling that in Asia, where I come from, it's going to be also going to catch up, and we're going to see more and more people using what they build as their credentials, as opposed to this university degree. Their diploma really is just to buy trust from these companies, to show them, hey, I can be valuable to you. But really, in the future, we're going to be more and more authentic with how we present value. We want to be more clear. The same way previously that we call unicorns, we stopped appreciating them as much as we do camels. Companies that can actually last long, they bootstrap. Totally. It's a clear value. In the future, people want more authentic proof of value creation from people, not just from university degrees.
Right. Totally. And playing on just my banker experience, the corporate finance, the M&A world, you're not going to be valuing companies, or you're going to have a very hard time valuing companies if you don't have cash flows that derive the value of a company. Right. Mm-hmm. I think that for people that are technical, just like I had a formal education in finance and business as a whole, I think there's a lot of people that pursue technical education, whether it be CS, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, whatever, that then also don't believe that they should understand the financial bit and accounting. So I think there's so many talented engineers out there, builders, you see them on X all the time. There's usually an obvious knowledge gap that these people don't actually understand what even the mid to later stages of this business could be. The last thing you'd want to do is build something, get removed from your board because you don't understand what your operating expenditures are. You don't actually understand what's going to take this 10x, right? You've gone 0 to 1. How do you go from 1 to 10 and 10 to 100 and beyond? So I think that there's so much self-studying for business people into the technical world, but there's not nearly as much technical people self-studying the business bit. And believe me, it is all available online, all of it, right? So I think that, just pertaining back to the conversation, right? Having an economy here in the US, right? Where you have college that's pushed upon you, right? There are tons of values to college, most of which are the ability to have access to resources. Some schools are definitely better than others in that regard. But I think that the key is to have friends that you ultimately go and build a company with. Having that circle, I'm out of college. There's not very many points in my life where I'm just meeting, a bunch of people unless I really put in the work. Friendships are hard. Maintaining relationships with family is hard when you're trying to just make the thing happen on your own. We need to normalize this idea of college is so great because you are connected and you're at your peak of connectivity in your life, and the value of the network you build, if you do it right and you nurture it, can extend to far beyond, your career, far beyond your immediate entry-level career and whatnot. So I do think that my advice, despite what I've done, I think a lot of people should stay in school. I think if a lot of people should stay in their job and work on something on the side. And if there is a point where you have something that can be profitable, you're bootstrapping, right? Don't raise money. If you can do that and then have that become your income and your career, you're living the dream, right? And also just one other point I just want to touch on. I think that in at least the Silicon Valley bubble that you and I kind of find ourselves in, the new raise a the new raise around a VC for a moonshot goal, just to realize how impossible that really is. And the odds are so low. I think that's shifting away. The new raise for a moonshot is, I'm going to build a scrappy, monthly recurring, a profitable business that almost is a lifestyle business and can become something much greater than that. I would not raise venture capital again unless I was working on something that was just so demanding from a capital standpoint, infrastructure, maybe it's hardware. I think you can avoid that trap. And I really believe it is a trap for so many founders.
I have a very, very strong opinion on your last point. I think most investments are actually more harmful than they're beneficial to founders. Just look at it in a pragmatic view. You're giving a 20-year-old kid, 21, a ton of cash, and they don't have a clear path to the future. They don't really have a plan on what they really want to build. And their product is still also debatable. It's still growing, it's still shifting. So it's good on the VC side to spray and pray, but on your side as a founder, be very, very careful. Not just talking about psychological money can make you greedy or whatever, but also mismanaging money can cost you in your future, making financial decisions which might cost even more in the future than you have been invested with. So that's something to be cautious with. And a point regarding university is a place to network. That's a reason why I actually returned to academia, but now not to study. I'm studying, of course, but I am here to network. I am going to a lesser, less demanding university, but they're known for their network. They have it's in a good position. It's in the middle of the town with a lot of buildings, a lot of startups going on. So this is my networking opportunity, and I'm going to be here for a few more years, and that's my time to build, right? This is my time to build, to network with people like you, to learn, and this is my actual university, right? I'm not in class writing notes down about what the VC is, okay? I can learn that from YC startup school.
Right.
But talking to people like you through my podcast, and of course you also talking to people around you, that's how we actually learn.
I hear you. The experiential learning and just going out and doing the thing, taking risks. I've personally made it a point of emphasis in my own life where if I'm not getting rejected at least one time daily, I am not growing enough. It not only builds character and thicker skin, which is so important when you're trying to do something that no one believes in. It's really emotionally demanding to a point where most people who are going to watch this don't understand until they've done it themselves. Startups are very lonely. I've never made it to the top, but I have some very, very successful, wealthy, exited startup founders in my own network who I'm fortunate to have access to. And they just talk about how much more progressively lonelier it actually gets as you start to succeed. Because then you have this whole set of problems where imagine me posting on social media where I've exited a company for, let's just say, a couple $100 million or $1 billion. My story is, it might be awe-inspiring and amazing to watch, but none of my audience is going to be able to relate to where I'm at. And that's something I don't have. A lot of people can relate to where I am today, which is why it's been so amazing to do this whole community building exercise right on social media. Also, I want to hit on one point that you mentioned about spray and pray with VCs. I think that something that I did not fully internalize was this power law distribution, was the business model of VCs, meaning they will invest in, let's say, a batch of 100 companies, and the most successful investors in that 100 sample might have 3 exits and maybe one that is, considered a phenomenal fund returner. Your incentives and lifestyle and goals as an entrepreneur are often very much at odds with what the venture capitalist needs to happen to make their investment worthwhile. So having that understanding that there is this natural friction point and disagreement inherently within the startup venture relationship is important. And then 2, with respect to capital allocation, you mentioned, we have millions of dollars going to 17, 18, 20-year-olds, whatever, right? What do I do with the money? Something that I've always heard is you got to spend money to make money. And while I do agree with that, you need to spend money in the right places that are ROI positive to make money. I found it extremely difficult to find areas to allocate all of our marketing budget where we weren't just lighting money on fire. And the VCs also have this allocation problem where they have so much money being invested from LPs, right, limited partners, and they need to invest that in companies. They're going to put money into teams that are very likely not going to succeed, right? The vast majority are not going to succeed, but they still have that capital allocation problem. So I think something that I'm trying to do next is avoid this capital allocation problem, not think about or have the incentives of institutional investors affect me and what I believe the direction and pace of the business should be, but also having limited resources allows me to be in this frugality mindset where it's much easier to spend money that's not yours. We don't like to spend money for coffees and stuff like this, but when I have raised $1 million, yeah, sure, $1,000 a month subscription, that's nothing. Having a business that's funded and runs based on your revenues forces you to create something people want, forces you to see if this business is actually working, and that gives you the freedom to scale the business how you want. So I really want to inspire more people to recognize that, sure, fundraising's there, but if you really want to build something that could change your life, not just your investors, which is likely the case even in big exits, try scaling slower, try doing more with less until you have that product that works, and then you have the freedom to do whatever you want from that point. And I think that's really important.
Slow is fast, and only raise money when capital is the constraint to growth. That's it. Don't race because you can. And right. that's really dangerous, because I think injecting money is like injecting steroids to a person who's trying to grow big, right? But if you're growing and you're exercising the wrong exercises, you're going to be very, very malformed and you're going to look like an alien, okay? Don't do that. So slow is fast. Learn. I think as a first-time founder, even though you are trying to build something people would want to pay for, that's obviously the goal. That's an indicative of value. However, I think it's the time to learn and not to earn. And your first time is the time to explore what being a founder is like. And like you said, it's very, very lonely. I've been there, and I'm sure you've been there as well. It's very hard. And I think the reason a lot of people cave in, a lot of founders cave in, is because they don't have the support system. So for a lot of founders that are building something right now, who are listening to this is a very, very good exercise to talk, to create podcasts, to create content, reach out, because understand that the more unconventional your life is, and being a founder is super unconventional, okay?
Yep.
You have a lot of founders out there because we have the internet that shows us everyone. But, percentage-wise in the world, people who build things are very, very few compared to those who consume, those who just join the big ones.
Totally.
So reach out, find your team, find your friends, find your community. And this has helped me very, very much. And I think for my next company, because of this, I have a very, very strong chance on doing better.
And just to give you a practical piece of advice, right? The answer to nearly all the questions, DMs I get on Instagram, and I get a significant amount of inbound every week because people want to hear what I have to say about something, right? I find myself shockingly giving the advice that content solves your problem. Community building will solve your problem. Hey, Max, there's not a lot of investors in my area, or, I don't have access. I don't have the connections. I don't have the network. Great. Go start a podcast and go invite VCs into your show. You will get a number of investors that will happily come on. And at the end, right when you're turning off, hey, it was great talking with you. I actually have something I'm working on the side. I would love if I could have, 10, 15 minutes of your time when we run through this sometime in the next couple of weeks. They are not going to say no. You gave and you received. That is the Techstars motto. It's give first. It's not this hocus pocus, we're all singing Kumbaya around the campfire strategy. This is a real, very real strategy. Give first means invest. Invest in the relationship, invest in a vendor, invest in an employee, because humans naturally want to reciprocate. And equilibrium is just some weird phenomenon that our world and nature just somehow happens to reach this equilibrium. Sometimes not so efficiently, sometimes very efficiently. And I believe that there is balance and that people want balance. So if you have a need, you don't have technical talent, you don't have customers, you don't have investors, start a podcast, start a show, speak honestly, pick up the phone. After the first video, which is super scary, kind of gets much easier from there. That was my experience. So I think that, like you said, not just finding the communities, if you're in this unconventional segment of society, but if there isn't one that suits you very well, go and build your community. And I'm sure there's at least several people around this rock we live on that want to hear what you have to say.
I've got a quite specific question, because I'm also trying to grow my social media, but that's for later. The first question, or the first thing that I want to say, is to expand on your topic about equilibrium. It's a very, very interesting thing. I think this is the first time for me to hear that. Sure, we can have the word about karma, give, and you shall receive. But putting this in a physical point of view, like physics, equilibrium, is a very interesting thing. And people like to ask too much. They think they're lacking, and so they want to ask a lot from the world. They build a company for the sake of, what can I get? How can I grow? How can I become Tony Stark, this tech founder CEO? But you have so much as a young person. You have so much time. You have so much connections. You have so much resources that people who would pay for you don't have. So give that first, because one day when you no longer have those things, when your time is draining low and you have other commitments, now it's your time to receive. And I think what Hormozy said, give value first, and you just said it. It's a very, very important thing.
Right. This is beyond just also the modern day motivational speakers, Hormozy, whoever it is, right? Like, this is Aristotle, ethos, pathos, logos. These concepts of how to captivate people, how to storytell, have been in existence for pretty much all of time, where spoken language or written language has been in existence and something we've done as humans. So I think that there's a dichotomy here where many folks, let's just take any given entrepreneur or startup founder, right? They're starting a business, they have one. If they're going to pick up a girl or maybe pick up a guy, whatever it is, right? They're trying to find a significant partner. If you're going to ask the person before that first date or on that first date, hey, can you come to my house and start cooking and cleaning for me? Can you fold my laundry? People don't network poorly for the most part in their personal lives. If you want to make a friend, you're not going to go and ask them to do this or to buy your coffee. It's just, that would feel so incorrect from a cultural standpoint. It just wouldn't feel right. People won't do it. But then when it comes to business, when there's money involved, greed consumes people's actual tendencies. And that is where the equilibrium and that dead weight loss, right, is created. So the simplest networking tactic that I almost always forget when I'm at an event or I'm in person with someone that I think is super impressive and I want to know, stop treating this person like they are this God, mythic like figure. Don't try to extract value. Do this. Try to become their friend. Don't talk about business. Talk about golf. Talk about what they like. Talk about music. The more you just treat every interaction, networking, I call it friendship now. When you have friends, friends do things for other friends. So you can immediately sniff out someone that is being authentic and wants to be your friend immediately versus someone that is treating this as in a transactional nature. So something that I like to do before I network, before I get on a call, before I go to an event, like I will write it down somewhere, like either on a Post-it note or something, and I'll just look at it. It's like, be friends, because when you just approach it like a friendship, everything else is going to follow, if assuming they also want to be your friend. I think that's a huge hack. It's super simple. People aren't going to like that. Well, that's it, right? Just do what you do with your friends in business settings and sales, and you'll see you'll go much farther because you're going to have the trust. Once you have trust, then dollars start to flow.
Exactly. Act like a fan, be treated like a fan. And in today's age, we're so polished. We have so many people trying to be something they're not. Authenticity is in scarce amount. And if you can't just show authentic behavior, just be you, people love that. People are drawn to people who are confident in being themselves and treat you like a person. Sure, you can be a celebrity, you're a top A-list celebrity, but if you just approach them like a friend, hey, I saw it, I like it, you want to have whatever, sometime people will follow. Now, the question of building a social media community to grow, right now I'm obviously going to chop up my podcasts and make them into short form clips. Now, a question I have is, how do you separate that, or do you separate that from your personal account? Like, do you just slowly shift your content from, going to trips with friends and then suddenly a bunch of content about your niche, your topic, or you still interlace them once in a while, or do you make a separate account? This is something I'm currently figuring out.
There's no one size fits all. I am very early into this journey, so I've made similar, decisions with either conscious effort or not much. So I started by taking my personal Instagram page with my trips with my friends in my life, and I just started posting content one day for my niche. I think it worked for me because although my page wasn't designed to do that initially, it was just my personal Instagram. People associated me with the sort of lessons and just style of video that I'm doing anyways. That's how I was in real life. I'm just this crazy, energetic, passionate person. So it wasn't like this chasm where that didn't make sense from like a viewership perspective, right? If I started to talk about doing fishing or doing fly fishing lessons, yeah, that probably would have warranted a new page because that had nothing to do with myself. So the playbook that I'm executing, and I am not smart enough to come up with something like this, but I am seeing success, is a book, Founder Brand by Dave Gerhardt. If anyone's read it here, that is a Boston-based founder who's had tremendous success in not only executing, but pioneering this founder brand concept. He's one of many, but specifically within like B2B SaaS and how to actually build brands. So for me, I wanted to make sure that Max Goldberg had name recognition at some point, had a presence, had authority. That way, it doesn't matter what project I'm working on, or if I become a doctor, I'll still have some sort of presence myself where I can show that journey. And that is pretty, I think, inspiring and crazy enough for people to watch. So what I didn't want to do is silo myself into this product or business agnostic page. I think you can totally do that, but I think it's much more valuable to have a founder brand. And now when I plan to launch something soon, a side project, I will create another page that is just about that specific business content in that space. But the algorithms will help me because my face will be in that new page. It will take the videos that my face is in and serve them back to my main page, my founder brand following. So I know for a fact that when I launch my side project, it's going to get fed back to my existing account that you met me on, and I'm going to reach engineers. I'm going to reach startup founders. And that's the ICP that I want to actually go after because I live and breathe that experience. So I think that there's not one size fits all. I think the most important thing is to test, just like you'd need a split test, right? A/B test, concepts, designs, products, and iterate. This is turning out to be more or less the exact same process. I've grown somewhat quickly in this first 2 months of posting. I have a hell of a lot to learn and a lot more that I want to do with the page. But again, every time I'm trying to post different types of things, lead with different hooks, try different angles, reach different people to see what sticks, and then try to rinse and repeat that in a way that's fresh.
Definitely. That's definitely on my mind. And I really agree on that thing you mentioned about the founder brand. I'll definitely give the book a read. I think you've noticed the phenomenon where Elon Musk has more following than Tesla, SpaceX, or any other of these companies. And Steve Jobs, maybe in the past, has more recognition than Apple itself. So in the future, people want to trust faces. People want to see a person, a character, not just a product. Obviously, they want to gain value from the product, but it's the person that they follow. So that's a good strategy that I'm definitely going to implement. So yeah, very, very interesting. Very interesting. It's been very, very fun 1 hour. Any advices for people who are going to build company first timers?
Yeah. Start building some sort of community or social media presence now. It's never been easier to get started. There's never been more resource and people like us who are at least giving value back to our own communities on what's working, what's not working. Consume, educate yourself, learn. The reality is it will not happen overnight. So try to tame your expectations. We all want to get there, but everyone knows that your first 0 to 100K, your first $1 million in net worth or business, right? Those are the hardest. Once you have that business that's working, once you have those capital resources, it's so much easier. And you hear this time and time again to scale past that point. So build your own distribution channel. Focus more on the growth than the product itself. And that's somewhat controversial, but I really believe that. And recognize that every piece of action, piece of content, line of code that you write now is going to snowball and compound and take you places where you won't even recognize yourself in 5-10 years. So if you're willing to play the long game, if you know that no matter what happens, whether you're working a job, you're that guy, you're that woman that's going to go and build side projects no matter what kind of employment you have, make sure you're signing up for the marathon and not the sprint, because most people who are successful in whatever they do, but very much in business, are just the ones who survived the longest and kept going despite that adversity and failure. That is the single most important trait. And if that doesn't sound like you, that's totally okay. You can go and become an employee or a co-founder at a company with someone who has that drive. But I think it's essential that you surround yourselves at least with those people who are going to push it to that place. And There's nothing wrong with elevating yourself and riding success with someone else. There's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. Love it. Man, it's been a masterclass. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This was great.
Thank you, man.
All our shows and podcasts available online on our website and on all podcast platforms. Search Audioversity.
Come to my hackathon. Come. Bo. I just bought you hackathon. Special deal. 20% off.
Startup Shuk. Exploring Israel's tech bazaar with Deo Arlo.